A particular kind of heaviness settles in when you're lying awake at 3 in the morning and the quiet becomes too loud. This isn't anxiety about something specific, but something broader, a sense that somewhere, somehow you've fallen off pace. While you were catching your breath, everyone else kept running, and now the distance between where you are and where you think you should be has become a canyon you can't see across. You know this feeling because it arrives uninvited during a birthday that feels more like evidence than celebration. Or when you're scrolling through your phone and everyone else's life looks like a highlight reel, while yours feels like deleted scenes. Reunions bring it. Family dinners when someone asks what you've been up to, that pause before you answer simple questions about your life. The strange thing is how this feeling doesn't announce itself clearly. It doesn't say I'm insecurity or I'm fear, but disguises itself as fact, as objective truth. You don't feel like you're behind because you are behind. Or so it seems. The timeline exists somewhere, unwritten but universally understood. And you've missed your mark at 25 and no clear career, 30 and single, 35 and not where you imagined, 40 and starting over. The numbers themselves become accusers, but nobody tells you that the finish line you're measuring yourself against is invisible because it doesn't exist. Not really, not in any material way. What you're racing is a ghost, a collective hallucination we've all agreed to believe in, that there's a right time for things, a proper order, a schedule for becoming a full person. The cruelest part is how this hallucination feels more real than your actual life. We live in a peculiar kind of society now, one with more freedom than any generation before us, and somehow more ways to feel inadequate. Your grandparents likely followed a script: education and marriage and career and family and retirement. Not because it was right, but because it was the only visible path. The script was limiting, yes, but it was also clear, and you knew where you stood because everyone stood in roughly the same line. Now the paths have multiplied. You can do anything, be anyone, go anywhere, which sounds like liberation, until you realise it also means you can fail in infinite directions. Every choice becomes evidence. Every unchosen path whispers that you might have gotten it wrong. This is the paradox of our time. More options and less certainty that we're making the right ones, more doors and less confidence about which to walk through. Psychologists call this temporal comparison, the act of measuring your present self against an imagined version who made different choices, moved faster, wanted different things. But you're not just comparing yourself to who you could have been, you're comparing yourself to who you think you should be by now. That phantom self who had it figured out earlier, who didn't waste time, who knew what they wanted and went after it without hesitation. And beneath all of this, there's something even quieter, a fear that isn't about timelines at all, but about worth, about whether you matter if you're not achieving, advancing, arriving. As if your value is measured in milestones and every year that passes without them means you're somehow less impressive, less interesting, less deserving of taking up space. The truth, the one that's hard to hold on to, is that feeling behind has almost nothing to do with where you actually are. What you're experiencing is a story you're telling about where you are. A narrative built from invisible rules, absorbed from 1,000 sources you can't even name. Magazines and movies and offhand comments, and the success stories people choose to share. It's constructed from comparison and assumption, from watching other people's outsides while living in your own inside. You're not behind, but here, in this moment, in this life, on this path that is only yours. But that knowing, that deep bone level knowing, is the hardest thing to reach when the world keeps showing you evidence that you're wrong. When every algorithm feeds you someone else's achievement, when every gathering becomes an informal audit of your progress. So you carry this weight, this invisible finish line you can never quite reach because it moves every time you get close. The exhaustion isn't just from trying to catch up, but from pretending you're not tired, from smiling through the questions, from holding yourself together in a culture that treats your timeline like a test you're failing. But what if the test itself is the problem? What if the feeling of being behind is revealing something not about where you are, but about the system of measurement itself? What if this ache you carry is actually the sound of your real life trying to break through the story you've been told about how life should look? This is where we begin, not with answers or fixes, but with recognition. With seeing this feeling for what it really is, and understanding why it has such a grip on you. Your brain is doing something particular when you feel behind, something old and protective, and in its own way trying to keep you safe. To understand it, you have to go back before the timelines and the milestones, back to when you first learnt that love and acceptance might be conditional. Most of us don't remember the exact moment, but somewhere in childhood, we absorbed an equation where your worth equals your achievements and your value equals your performance. If you're not doing enough, being enough, becoming enough, then maybe you're not enough at all. A parent's face lighting up only when you brought home good grades, or the way affection felt like a reward for being impressive rather than a given for simply existing. Sometimes it was more subtle than that, a culture that celebrated the exceptional and overlooked the ordinary, a world that taught you love is something you earn rather than something you are. This is where the architecture begins, with the childhood realization that acceptance isn't guaranteed, but contingent. Contingent on being good, smart, successful, ahead. And so you learn to scan the horizon constantly, measuring yourself against others, trying to determine if you're worthy yet, if you've done enough to deserve belonging. Social comparison is what psychologists call this, but that term doesn't quite capture the violence of it. The way you can be having a perfectly fine day until you see someone else's engagement announcement, someone else's promotion, someone else's beautiful home or exotic vacation, or seemingly effortless success. And suddenly your day isn't fine anymore. Suddenly you're aware of everything you don't have, everything you haven't done, every way you're not measuring up. Two directions exist for this comparison. Upward comparison means looking at people who seem ahead of you and feeling inadequate, envious, small. Downward comparison means looking at people who seem behind you and feeling momentary relief that at least you're not there. Neither brings peace. Upward comparison is obvious torture, while downward comparison is a temporary sedative that leaves you more anxious than before. Because now you're afraid of sliding backward, of becoming the person others look down at for relief. What makes this so painful is that your brain genuinely believes it's seeing objective reality. When you look at someone else's life and think they have it together and I don't, that doesn't feel like interpretation but like fact. But you're only seeing what they choose to show, filtered through what you're afraid of in yourself. You're not comparing lives but comparing your interior reality, messy and uncertain and full of doubt, to someone else's exterior performance. It's not a fair contest and was never designed to be. Social media has turned this into a kind of psychological warfare. Every platform is engineered to show you the best moments of everyone else's life in concentrated form, a constant stream of evidence that everyone is doing better than you, moving faster, celebrating more, living bigger. Your brain isn't designed to handle this volume of comparison. So for most of human history, you compared yourself to maybe a few dozen people in your immediate community. But now you're comparing yourself to thousands, millions, all the time. Your nervous system registers each comparison as a small threat, a reminder that you might not be safe, might not belong, might not be enough. The feeling of being behind isn't just psychological, but physiological. Your brain processes it as danger, because for our ancestors, being left behind by the tribe meant death. Social exclusion was existential threat. When you feel behind, your nervous system activates the same ancient alarm system designed to keep you alive. Your cortisol rises, your body tenses, your thoughts spiral. Not because you're dramatic or weak, but because your brain genuinely believes you're in danger of being cast out. This is why the feeling is so persistent, so difficult to reason away. You can't logic yourself out of a survival response, or think your way into calm when your body is screaming that you're at risk. Beneath all of this, thought patterns live that keep the feeling locked in place. Cognitive distortions like all or nothing thinking, where either you're successful or you're a failure with no in-between. Mental filtering means scanning your life for evidence of inadequacy while ignoring everything that contradicts it. Should statements create a running list of everything you should have done by now, should be doing, should want, should have figured out. These thoughts aren't truths but habits, grooves worn deep by repetition until they feel like the voice of reality itself. Perfectionism lives here too. Not the healthy kind that helps you do good work, but the toxic kind that convinces you anything less than exceptional is worthless. That if you can't do it perfectly, there's no point in doing it at all. That mistakes are evidence of fundamental brokenness, rather than proof of being human. Perfectionism tells you the timeline matters, Because if you're not ahead, if you're not exceeding expectations, then you're failing. And if you're failing, you're not worthy of love. Layer upon layer of protection mechanisms that were supposed to keep you safe have instead become a prison. You learnt to achieve to earn love. You learnt to compare to know where you stand. You learned to be perfect to avoid rejection. Now you're exhausted, haunted by an invisible standard you can never quite meet, running a race no one else is racing toward a finish line that doesn't exist. But here's what your brain doesn't tell you. This feeling, this constant sense of being behind isn't revealing the truth about your life, but revealing the truth about what you were taught to believe about your life. About worth, about time, about what it means to be enough. And the question isn't whether you're behind, but behind what? Exactly, according to whom and for what purpose? Who benefits from you believing you're not where you should be? Not you, not your peace, not your presence in your own life. The architecture is strong but not inevitable. And it's not you but something that happened to you. Something you learned because you had to survive in a world that made love conditional. What you learned you can unlearn. What was built can be rebuilt. Not all at once, not by force, but slowly by seeing it clearly. By recognizing the difference between the voice of truth and the voice of old protection. This is the work, not to get ahead but to wake up. A particular kind of paralysis comes with feeling behind. You'd think it would make you move faster, work harder, push yourself to catch up, and sometimes it does for a while. More often it does the opposite, and freezes you. You become so aware of how far you have to go that you can't take the first step. Every action feels too small to matter, and every inaction becomes more evidence that you're failing. It's a trap with no exit. The cost shows up in small ways first. You stop sharing your wins because they feel insignificant compared to what you think you should have accomplished. You decline invitations because facing people means facing questions about your life you don't want to answer. Starting new things feels pointless when you're already so far behind. The gap between where you are and where you think you should be becomes so painful that you'd rather numb out than feel it. And then the cost grows. Anxiety hums in the background of everything, while depression feels like heaviness, like moving through water, like your life is happening at a distance you can't quite close. Shame tells you to hide, to make yourself smaller, to apologize for taking up space. This isn't weakness, but what happens when you spend years believing you're not enough. The cruelest part is how it becomes self-fulfilling. The more you feel behind, the harder it becomes to move forward, and the harder it becomes to move forward, the more behind you fall. You watch time pass and opportunities slip by, and you know you're wasting your life, but knowing that doesn't give you the energy to change it. Knowing just adds another layer of shame, another reason to believe you're broken. This feeling steals something from you, the ability to be here now, to enjoy what you have, to celebrate small joys without qualifying them with everything you lack. You get the job, but it's not the right job. You meet someone, but it's too late, and you've wasted so much time. You accomplish something, but instead of feeling proud, you think about how you should have done it years ago. The present moment is always contaminated by the story of what should have been. And yet, and this is the part that's hard to hold, this feeling is also trying to help you. Not in any way that actually helps, but in the way a wound tries to protect itself by forming a scar. Feeling behind is, in its twisted logic, a defense mechanism. A way of protecting you from something even more frightening than inadequacy, because if you're behind, you don't have to fully try. You don't have to risk putting yourself out there and discovering that even your best isn't good enough. You don't have to face the possibility that you'll try and still fail, still be rejected, still be ordinary. Feeling behind keeps you safe from that exposure and gives you an excuse. I could be successful if I had started earlier, if I had more time, if circumstances were different. The feeling of being behind preserves the fantasy that you could be extraordinary. You just haven't had the chance yet. This is what your psyche is protecting. The idea that you're still capable of becoming who you want to be, that the potential is still there untapped, that you haven't failed because you haven't really tried yet. It's protection through postponement, through staying in the realm of possibility, rather than the realm of reality. Something else lives here too, something the feeling protects you from. The terrifying freedom of realizing there is no timeline, that you're allowed to want what you want when you want it, that you can start over, that you can change directions, that your life doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. This freedom is vast and disorienting. And feeling behind, believing in the timeline, gives you something solid to push against. A structure, a map. Even if the map is making you miserable, at least it tells you where you are. But here's where it gets complicated. A difference exists between the kind of striving that comes from curiosity and growth and the kind that comes from fear and inadequacy. Healthy striving says, I want to learn this, build this, become this. Toxic urgency says, I have to achieve this or I'll be worthless. One expands you while the other exhausts you. And when you're trapped in the feeling of being behind, everything becomes toxic urgency. Everything becomes about proving yourself rather than discovering yourself. This is why some people feel behind even after they catch up, even after they get the job, the relationship, the house, the life they thought they wanted. The feeling was never really about external milestones, but about internal worth. And if your worth is still tied to achievement, then no achievement will ever be enough. The goalpost will keep moving. There will always be a new way to feel inadequate, a new comparison to lose, a new timeline to fall behind on. You can spend your whole life chasing a feeling of being enough and never arrive. Not because you're failing, but because the destination doesn't exist. Enough isn't a place you reach, but a decision you make. A reality you choose to accept. That you are enough now, as you are, even if you never accomplish another thing. Even if you never catch up to the imaginary timeline. Even if your life looks nothing like what you thought it would. The cost of feeling behind is the life you're living right now, the one that's happening while you're measuring yourself against ghosts and futures and pasts that don't exist. The present moment, unrepeatable and precious, slipping by while you grade yourself for not being somewhere else. But the function, the reason this feeling won't let go, is that some part of you still believes it's keeping you safe. Still believes that if you just feel bad enough about being behind, you'll finally do what you need to do to catch up. The feeling is trying to motivate you, but doesn't realize it's doing the opposite. Doesn't realize it's the cage, not the key. A moment comes, if you're lucky, when something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly, like light changing in a room. So gradually you don't notice until suddenly you can see things you couldn't before. You're still in the same place, but looking at it differently. And the timeline that felt like truth starts to look more like a story. One you can examine, one you can question, one you can possibly rewrite. It begins with a simple recognition. There is no universal timeline, not a real one. Not one that actually governs how lives unfold. Cultural scripts and social expectations and statistical averages exist. Yes, but there is no cosmic law that says you must achieve certain things by certain ages or your life is invalid. The timeline exists only in the collective agreement to believe in it, and you can withdraw your agreement. This isn't about pretending age doesn't matter or that timing is irrelevant. Some things are genuinely time-sensitive. Biology and health and specific opportunities. But most of what you're measuring yourself against isn't actually time sensitive, but just socially determined. Someone decided 30 is the age you should have your life figured out, and we all absorbed it as fact. Someone decided there's a right order, career, then relationship, then house, then children, and we internalized it as the only legitimate path. But who decided, and why does their decision get to determine your worth? What if you stopped treating your life like a linear progression? A ladder you're supposed to climb rung by rung, never skipping, never going backward. What if it's more like a spiral where you return to the same themes, the same questions, the same challenges, but each time at a different level, each time with more understanding? You don't move only forward, but inward, outward, backward sometimes, in circles that look like you're stuck until you realize you're deepening. The shift when it comes isn't about replacing I'm behind with I'm exactly where I need to be. That can feel like a toxic positivity bypass that doesn't honor the real pain. The shift is more subtle, learning to hold both truths at once. I feel behind and I'm on my own path. I wish some things had happened differently, and my life is unfolding in its own time. I'm frustrated with where I am, and this moment is all I actually have. Psychologists call this temporal self-compassion. The ability to be kind to yourself across time, to forgive your past self for not knowing what you know now, to be patient with your present self for still figuring things out, to trust your future self to get where you're going even if you can't see the path yet. It's the opposite of the harsh judgment that says you should be further along. It's the gentle acknowledgement that you're doing the best you can with what you have, what you know, who you are right now. And it means shifting from milestone chasing to value-based living. From asking what should I have accomplished by now to asking what matters to me. What do I actually care about? What kind of person do I want to be, regardless of external markers of success? Because when you live according to your values, presence or creativity, or kindness or growth or whatever they are for you, there's no timeline, there's no behind. There's only whether you're moving toward what matters or away from it. And that's a question you can answer in any moment, at any age, from any starting point. This doesn't mean ambition disappears or that you stop wanting things or working toward goals. It means the wanting comes from a different place, not from fear of being left behind, not from needing to prove yourself, but from genuine curiosity, from desire, from the pull toward becoming more fully who you are rather than who you think you should be. You start to notice the difference between your own voice and the voice of internalized expectation. The voice that actually wants something and the voice that thinks you should want it because everyone else does. The voice of authentic longing and the voice of fear disguised as aspiration. Learning to tell them apart is the work of a lifetime, but it starts with listening, with getting quiet enough to hear what you actually want beneath all the noise about what you should want, and you develop tolerance for your own pace. This might be the hardest part because your pace is yours, slower than some people, faster than others, entirely incomparable because you're not running the same race. Your pace includes rest and detours, and getting lost and changing your mind about where you're going. Your pace is allowed to be unimpressive to other people, allowed to look like nothing is happening, even when everything is happening internally, allowed to be messy and non-linear and full of false starts. Building this tolerance means practicing being with discomfort, with the feeling of being behind without needing to fix it immediately, with the uncertainty of not knowing if you're making the right choices, with the vulnerability of living a life that doesn't fit the script. It means sitting with the reality that you can't control how others perceive your timeline, and that's okay. Their perception isn't your truth. Freedom emerges slowly from this shift. Not the freedom of having arrived or achieved or caught up, but the freedom of realizing you were never in a race. The freedom of understanding that your life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. The freedom of knowing you're allowed to take your time, to start over, to want different things than you wanted before, to be a beginner, to be confused, to not have it figured out. And maybe if you're very patient with yourself, you start to feel something like peace. Not because your circumstances have changed, not because you've finally caught up to where you think you should be, but because you've stopped measuring, because you've stepped off the timeline and into your actual life. This one, the only one you have, happening now in this breath, in this moment that doesn't care whether you're ahead or behind because it simply is. You were never behind, but always here, on your path, taking the time you needed to take, learning what you needed to learn, becoming who you're becoming. And that was always enough. Not because it's impressive, not because it looks good to anyone else, but because it's real, because it's yours, because this is what being alive actually looks like when you stop performing it and start living it. The timeline doesn't collapse all at once. Some days you'll still feel behind. Some days the old voice will return loud and convincing. But now you'll recognize it. Now you'll know it's not truth, but habit. And habits can be changed. Stories can be rewritten. Not to pretend everything is fine, but to make room for what's actually here. For who you actually are. For the life you're actually living. Timeline or not. This is the quiet revolution. Not proving you're enough, but knowing it. Not catching up, but arriving. Here, now, in your own time.